on, Foxy. It's your birthday. Not for real, just for play. This is Cree Summer, and Moana Nui will be right back.
Atlantic Con, how you doing? All right. So, I hope you guys are having a lot of fun. I hope when you spending a little bread. Amen. Because all this stuff here, I want all these creators, all of these artists, they don't want to go home with nothing. They need to sell out. So please show your appreciation for all of their work, amen? All right. So we are here at this time to moderate a panel. My name is Richard Wright. I am with the Black Comic Lords. I'm here on behalf of Herschel Lewis and Paul White Davis. We are going to be moderating this panel. We're going to have a discussion about the first Black-owned, Black-created comic book, All-Negro Comics. So we're going to talk a little history on this afternoon, okay? Just for the sake of sound and that kind of thing, I'm just asking that you kind of be intentional in hearing, because we may have some challenges with the microphones and that kind of thing, okay? All right, let's introduce our panelists. First off, I want to introduce this great man right here, former athlete, amen, entrepreneur, owns a gym, amen, the Honorable Derron Flood. Give him a hand clapper. Come on now, y'all do better than that. You wouldn't be here if you wasn't doing what he did. Now, I do preach on Sunday, so don't get me started. We will have church, I have no problem. All right? Also, we have the Honorable Dr. Qiana Whitted. Let me read her bio, because I don't have it. So we're going to just see what Wikipedia says. Dr. Qiana Whitted is a professor of English and African American Studies at the University of South Carolina. All right. Her books include A God of Justice, The Problem of Evil in the 20th Century Black Literature, and Eisner Award-winning EC Comics, Race, Shook, and Social Protests, and also Desegregating Comics, amen? Talking about comics, Black comic authors or creators in the 1940s, okay? So that's just a little bit of her resume. Could you please give her a hand clap of warm praise? All right. I know you're tired of hearing my voice and looking at my face. So with that time, we're gonna go ahead and get the show on the road. We're going to start with my man Paul. He's going to do an introduction, and we'll get into our conversation, all right? Thank you.
Good afternoon, y'all. So I thought it was proper to sort of introduce and get us started by hearing from the words of Orrin Evans, who put together All-Negro Comics. He says, All-Negro Comics, presenting another first in Negro history. Dear readers, this is the first issue of All-Negro Comics, jam-packed with fast action, African adventure, good clean humor, and fantasy. Every brushstroke and pen line in the drawings on these pages are by Negro artists, and each drawing is an original. That is, none has been published anywhere before. This publication is another milestone in the splendid history of Negro journalism. All-Negro Comics will not only give Negro artists an opportunity gainfully to use their talents, but it will glorify Negro historical achievements. Through Ace Harlem, we hope dramatically to point up the outstanding contributions of thousands of fearless, intelligent, Negro police officers engaged in a constant fight against crime throughout the United States. Through Lion Man and Bubba, It is our hope to give American Negroes a reflection of their natural spirit of adventure and a finer appreciation of their African heritage. And through Sugarfoot and Snake Oil, we hope to recapture the almost lost humor of the lovable wandering Negro minstrel of the past. Finally, Dew Dillies will give all of us, young and old, an opportunity to romp through a delightful, almost fairy-like land of make-believe. And we're proud, too, of our big educational feature, a monthly historical calendar on which the contributions of the Negro to the world history will be set forth in each issue. Orrin C. Evans. So with that, we have Dr. Whitted to give us an overview as to the beginnings and what is the significance of All-Negro Comics. Dr. Whitted, put your hands together.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to have to speak up, really speak up so that I can be heard. Who here is familiar with this comic? Are there some of us, except for y'all on the stage? This is a copy that I bought on Amazon for like $5. It's not the 75th anniversary edition. It is not an original. It's not, you know. So I'm saying this because I was gonna offer to have them pass it around.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So why you look like that? Thank you.
Just need to hold it up here.
All right. Oh, sorry. Okay. So as it's coming around, I'll just say a few words about how this comic came to be. The foreword that we just heard from reporter Orrin C. Evans, he was a journalist in Philadelphia for the Philadelphia Record. He actually wrote about racial discrimination for that paper, and he was interested in comic books. He knew and was quoted in Time magazine as saying that he knew that black kids were reading comics and that often what they saw was racial distortions. Who here has heard of Steamboat or Ebony White, or who are some of the other minstrel figures? That was what was common in 1940. If you were looking for black people, African people, any brown or black people, they often looked like Sambo characters, and Orrin C. Evans knew this. And so when he left the newspaper, he got some friends from the Philadelphia School of Art, including his brother, and they created All-Negro Comics, which we can talk about this more a little bit later. It was a really common anthology format, so it contained multiple stories, a detective story, an adventure story, a little kid's fantasy story, and then like a humorous slapstick story, and some other smaller features. What's interesting, and I'll stop talking so we can get where, but there's not a superhero story in there. You're not going to find a caped figure solving crime. I have a colleague who considers Lion Man one of the first black superheroes. But Lion Man is interesting, as you'll see when you get the comic. He's an American-born scientist protecting a mountain of uranium in Africa from colonizers from outside. So long before Black Panther, long before a lot of the heroes we think of, Lion Man was in this comic in 1947. So I can say more, and I can answer questions, but where do you think we should go next?
Well, I'll take it.
I mean, y'all don't want me to let this.
Yeah.
So real quick, I want to direct this question to Derron Flood. As a collector, talk about the importance of this book to you personally.
Elite collector.
Okay, elite collector. There are collectors and there are elite collectors.
Collectors.
And Derron Flood has an exceptional collection. So, as an elite collector, what does this book really mean to you, bro?
Sorry.
So before I answer that question, I want to kind of talk about why everybody's here, right? So we all know that like nerddom and fandom is multifaceted, right? So we're into a lot of different things. I love anime, I love video games, I love nerd culture, but the one thing that I covet over all other things is comic books, particularly black comic books. And so this convention is a reflection of my interest. And so particularly highlighting, you know, Greg and Tribe and all of these other exemplary comic book collectors, it literally started with that book. And so for me, it was important for me and Dr. Whitted to come up with an idea to highlight the beginning, the genesis, if you will, of this comic book. And so for me, All-Negro Comics, so All-Negro Comics, for any collector, we're not just talking about black people, it's extremely high on their priority list to attain. I think there's one on eBay right now for about $40,000? Yeah, and it's not even like a high grade. I think it's a 7.0 or something like that. But I mean, relative to the year that it came out, that's extremely high grade, right? So for me personally, and actually not even me personally, I speak for all people that are into comic books. That is the holy grail of comics. Like, if you're into comic books, everybody's chasing this one book. It's like super unattainable, and if you can't find it, it's gonna cost you your house, like literally. And so that book is probably the most important book that I can think of out of all comics. You have the cultural element, you have the historic element, and then let's just keep it funky. There's a monetary element that comes along with that as well. So to answer your question, it is the most important comic book in all of comics.
This question probably should have got saved to the end, but it's always been in the back of my mind. Given when this book was created and all the hurdles they had to cross, if those guys, those artists, those creators were teleported here today, what would they think of their book? What would they think of the culture and where we're at today as far as black comics, black superheroes? I mean, there's a lot of questions in there, and that's a big question, but it's always been scratching in the back of my mind. What would those guys think of us today? So, that question's for both of y'all, by the way.
I was going to answer that anyway.
Oh, yeah, we have, okay, yeah.
You go first.
Well, I think they'd be proud, but I think they'd also be asking, who are the people publishing what we're seeing today? Right? Because one of the things that made this unique, there actually were black artists and writers of comics before this one, but what made this unique was that it had a black publisher. The editor was black, and controlling that aspect of it meant that they could make choices that they weren't able to make. I don't know if any of you know Matt Baker or Alvin Hollingsworth, people who, there were black artists who couldn't put their name on their art because they didn't want other people to know that they were E.C. Stoner, right? So I think that they would be proud, but they would also say, you know, who's behind the page, right?
She stole my answer.
Oh no! Did I really?
So she stole my answer. I was literally going to say, I think it's a two-story answer. I think they would be proud, just from a frequency standpoint, you know, because they were a one-off. You know what I mean? And I would think that if they were here today, they would see so many people putting in the same type of effort. We have independent publishers in here right now, like literally right now. And those are their children, like literally. And so in that regard, I think they would be very proud. But the other aspect is, you know, and not to like smear the MCU or DC but like, they own the rights to everything that's popular. And so they control the narratives. And a lot of times, and we talk about this all the time. We literally talk about this all the time in our group chat. We don't like the stories. And so we look introspectively and intra-communally and we say, well, what are we going to do about it? And it's people like Malachi. It's people like, you know, Larry Stroman. It's people like David. They're the answer. Like, they're literally the answer. So if we want our stories to be pushed the right way, we got to put our money behind, you know, the publishers that respect what we got going on.
So I have a pretty different take on the same question. One of the things that Dr. Whitted mentions in her book is the concept of racial time. And what does racial time mean? So racial time is the concept that we have what we have delayed. We get after everyone else. You know, anything across the board, freedom, the right to vote, the right to exist, it all comes after others. Same thing with comics. Back then, when we talk about, well, what would they back then think about us now? My answer is, man, y'all still dealing with some of the same problems we had to deal with back then. So you're saying, I can't get a regular series to do of your most popular character? Are you saying that, I can do my own book, but because of who controls the publication industry, who controls the paper, who controls the medium, who controls the stores that they come out in, my book may not come out as frequently as the mainstream book every month. Same problems today that they had back then. So that's kind of my sort of negative interpretation of what they would think of us today. But I think they would be happy to see this, because that never happened back then. So that's my take on it.
So to give some context for those who may or may not know, All-Negro Comics #1 came out in 1947. And the book leads into the thought that there was going to be an All-Negro Comics #2. And what happened was the distributors who were going to distribute the comic book, to print the paper, would not sell them the paper. That's literally why that comic book did not come out. When he talks about racial time, it's important for us to understand that every creator that's in here, every artist that's in here, they have a window. They are competing for your attention. And if you don't hold their attention, they will find something else to do. They will find something else to buy. And what happens is, when a creator who's just getting started creates a comic book, it takes, you got to move mountains just to make that happen. But when it comes out, he's got to be able to, or she's got to be able to recoup and then put out the next product. That's the problem for the independent collector, particularly the black independent collector. So it's nothing new under the sun. And so when you think about that, I want to ask Dr. Qiana, you talked about shadow books in talking about All-Negro Comics. So could you explain to us the concept of what shadow books are?
So in my chapter on All-Negro Comics, I talk about this concept of shadow books. I didn't come up with it. This is actually from Kevin Young, a poet currently running National Museum of African American History and Culture. He basically talks about the fact that in African American culture, art, literature, you can imagine a shadow library of all the books that were going to be written, or that were written and never published, or that for whatever reason never made it to that next stage. And he includes things that might have been lost in a fire, but he also includes things that because of social reasons, racial reasons, were not able to make it to that next level. And All-Negro Comics #2 sort of functions in that way. And the fact that they weren't even able to get newsprint to put #2 out. I'll use this opportunity though to plug a couple of things. This 75th edition here of All-Negro Comics, which started with Kickstarter, includes art and some additional comics from contemporary artists who are reimagining some of the characters. And Rosarium Publishing, which Bill Campbell is back there wave, is going to be putting out an issue or a book with Lion Man by John Jennings. Am I allowed to say all that? It's a book. Okay. So there could be new Lion Man stories coming out. I'll mention as an aside that they're
Good plug.
They're what is it called? Public domain.
Yeah.
So now you can use these characters and imagine new stories for them.
There's something I wanted to mention about this book. One of the things Dr. Whitted pointed out in her book, Desegregating Comics, available on Amazon.com. You can pick it up. Very reasonable price. She mentions the fact that the title, All-Negro Comics, that was not unusual for comics back then to have the term all and then describe what they're talking about. All crime stories, all science fiction, all fantasy, whatever the title is. It was not unusual. But I think it's more special with regard to this particular book because it's all Negro comics. And the reason I say it's special is because of the way the book was done. The book takes characters and stories and genres across the African American experience, across the spectrum, because we're not a monolith. There's stories of adventure in this book. There's stories of romance in this book. There's stories of drama, of crime stories, of humor in this book. Okay, all of that is in this book because all of that is who we are as human beings, and it addresses the entire experience. But from a comic book perspective also, there's different levels of characters in this book. Some of them a little bit more popular than others, some a little bit more challenging than others, but it's all Negro comics. So they tried to, as Rich said, as a creator, particularly a black independent creator, your audience, you have a very limited window to win that audience. And they were trying to hit everybody up, hit all angles to try and get your dollar, to try and get, your interest in purchasing the book and continuing to read the book. Unfortunately, they didn't have that opportunity, but they did it with the intent of doing a second issue. And one of the things that, Dr. Whitted mentioned in her book as well, technically speaking, there was another book first. Negro, why don't you talk about it?
Oh, okay. So we're talking about this as a milestone, a first black comic book, but there were other comics that featured African Americans and had some African American artists or writers. There was another comic called Negro Heroes. Parents Magazine Press produced it. It also came out a few months earlier in 1947, but they were reprints. Historical and biographical comics were also popular in the 40s. So they were reprints. The creators were not African American, and they were and the publisher was not African American, which is what distinguishes it from this one, which has original characters, not reprints, and black folks are on the page and behind the page. So that's what makes it a kind of first. Now, firsts are always,
Yeah.
yeah.
The difference though, is that whereas Negro Heroes was done as a compilation of of works that had already been done. They basically took a bunch of different works from different publications and put it in one book. This book was done from the ground up with intent, right? The intent was to represent all Negro comics, all different aspects of us, all different aspects of comics in general, all the facets of the same diamond. That's us, right?
I have a question for y'all.
Question for us?
For y'all, yes. Because you're talking about all the facets of Negro life, but it's not a very political book.
No.
I mean, think about it. This is 1947. It
Right.
doesn't talk about the war. It doesn't talk about segregation or Jim Crow. It doesn't make a plea for black rights or civil rights. How my students are actually kind of disappointed that it doesn't do that. I'm curious Were you thinking that it would have some kind of statement, some political message?
So I am probably the most political person on this panel. I poke my chest out proudly as a black person. I'm always putting pressure on black folks to do black things all the time. And so, of course, yes, I want everything to be socially empowering, politically empowering. But the human aspect of me is like, we need fantasy. We need escapes. We need to be able to expand beyond trauma even. Because a lot of times politics for black folks is trauma. You know what I mean? Like, we don't get the freedom to, like, we vote and we feel like our life is on the line every time we vote. You know what I'm saying? So it's a very, very different experience for us. So when I do pick up a fantasy book, it's almost like a breath of fresh air. And then also, what I know about black artists and writers, like, they can't even a lot of times see themselves doing them stories because they're wrapped up in the same racial experiences as all of us. So it's like it becomes a struggle. So again, it's a twofold answer. Like, I want everything to be super political, but at the same time, I want to give these artists and just the creators space to breathe and to dream beyond trauma and struggle and politics and things like that. And I appreciate both sides.
I agree 100%. I mean, not everything has to be about the struggle. I don't need to tell you what your struggle is. I don't need to tell you what our struggle has been. We live it every day. And it's good to have an escape. I call it the Will Smith effect, right? Will Smith built an entire career not having to do stuff, for the most part, about the struggle. He plays a hero, a character who just happens to be black. And that's, I think, how they approached a lot of this. It's what Richard says all the time. Every time he does a live, he says, all right, cool, it's a black comic book, but what's the story? Is it a good story? Tell the good story first, and the fact that the person is black will just enhance that story. It's that approach that I think they took with this book.
I think that, as far as your question goes, I think that when we talk about politics, I think politics is multifaceted. Somebody doesn't necessarily have to be overly political to be political. I think that some things are subtle. Black people, by and large, we're not a monolith, but we, by and large, are very conservative. That doesn't make us Republicans. It sure don't make us Democrats. But by and large, that's our culture. The thing is, how does that reflect in our culture? And so on the last page of All-Negro Comics, the original version, there's this page, hold that up for me, Herschel. There's this page of Ace Harlem, who is the detective in this book. And he just says something real incredible to me, but very simple. He says, remember, crime doesn't pay, kids. Stick to the church and use your energy for good, clean sports. Okay? That simple is not a quote-unquote political. It won't make you run out and go vote, but it will charge you or encourage you to do something positive with your life, which I think is the most political thing any of us can do, is to do something positive with your life and with your energy. And so, when we talk about the times of 1947, we're talking about literally 20 years before the Civil Rights Movement. We're talking about a time that was very polarizing in America. Ironically, we had more businesses, we had more control over the community before civil rights. So 80% of our homes were two-parent homes. a lot of good stuff happened in the 40s. And so what our dear brother was trying to do with this book, not only cover the aspects of black life, but to show us that we are heroic, that we can dream and we can fantasize. There's the child, the Dew Dillies, the children's fantasy in this book is two little babies. And only children, if I'm not mistaken, can see the Dew Dillies. But it's a fantasy element, and I love the Dew Dillies because, and I'll be transparent here, I was a kid who had an imaginary friend. Okay? So, yes, I had an imaginary friend. His name was Shaggy, and he was a dog. And
is he still in the room with us right now?
No, he's not in the room with us no more. But what I'm saying is that as a child, learning to play and learning to be with myself, I use that element to comfort myself, but also to dream. And so what All-Negro Comics does, one capacity of it, is not only we can solve crime, but we can also dream. And so we can't, sometimes we think that we don't have the permission to live your life. This whole element, cosplay, gaming, and all that, it's an element of your life. No one has a right, no matter how political I am, to say, don't do that, because that's not a black thing to do. But the point is that All-Negro Comics represents our ability to see the black experience through a black lens. It's no different than white people or Latinos or Asians. They live their life. We the only people that have to say something about who we are.
And apologize.
And apologize for it half the time. So again, I love this because I don't need permission from nobody to be a blur, to have interests outside of what pop culture is doing. I am unapologetically a nerd and will not apologize for it.
Nerd and proud.
All right? All-Negro Comics gave us that permission. And I'm gonna say this and shut up. As somebody that studies theology, there's a concept called first mention. And the whole concept is that whatever something is first mentioned in the scriptures, that it is to be used as a pillar of relevance. This is the first mention, which is why it should be important to you now if you do not know. All we have here, from Tuskegee Heirs, Harry Tubman Demon Slayer here, is all because somebody dared to write the stories and say and use the word All-Negro Comics.
Man, that's a good place to clap right there. You can hold the book for me now.
Yes, sir.
Listen, thunder stolen. I can't come in behind these guys and something. So I'm gonna come in short and sweet. Looking at 1947, I just believe in my heart that all the stuff that was, they had every right to be super social political. And I mean, every right. 1947, come on. But I think at the particular time, he probably was like, you know what? I'm already in this fantasy doing several different stories. I'm just gonna show them a world, well, they might have to deal with it here and there. And I'm not sure why he did it, why not. But a lot of comics were doing that at the time, kind of the reflection of the world on the outside. And so that's just the way that they chose to pivot. It's an amazing story. Like I said, I can say more, but thunder has completely been stolen, and I can't tug on that rope anymore. But since I have the microphone, I can ask my next question. It's gonna be a little controversial, and I'm gonna look at Paul when I say that, and he knows where this disclaimer.
All following comments will not necessarily be attributed or held responsible by the Black Comic Lords.
Okay. So last question, maybe perhaps. So looking particularly at that line, man. We know do you think there's anybody, and nothing bad, we love all these black characters, but looking at how he was protecting that mound of uranium, do you think there was a particular, years later, another company that took inspiration from that? I can go into a little bit more details, but I kind of want you to just to speak on it just a little bit, because we are big on saying that people take inspiration from us. Look what she's doing. Oh, that's what we do over here in our culture. So I don't know if that made any sense. Here you go.
Let me just point out that Herschel's other name is Herschel the Troll for a reason.
I'm not trolling.
Go ahead.
So you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. Yes, the idea maybe have come from Black Panther. You want to take a swipe at Black Panther any chance you get. Any chance. So this is Black Panther's #1 hater, y'all. He hates Black Panther. So any opportunity he gets to hate on Black Panther, he's going to hate. So maybe, yes, maybe the inspiration came from Black Panther. But guys, we're going to, we got to wrap things up.
Black Panther was after.
No, he was. Yeah, he was. Well, we was talking about, Black Panther. Yeah, you know what I meant.
Yeah.
So we have to wrap things up. I'm sorry. Do you guys have any questions for Dr. Whitted or the Black Comic Lords? Anybody? Any questions? Yes, ma'am?
Where can we get that book?
Oh, this book here.
The question was, where did she get the book?
There we go.
So
Keep talking.
this was a Kickstarter. They may have plans to release it more widely. It actually won an Eisner this couple weeks ago. You can buy that copy that I circulated. You can just buy it. It's a reprint I bought on Amazon. But if you want this one, you can come talk to me and I can share his information. But it started off as a Kickstarter, and you have to go through that. Is that clear?
Anybody else? Anybody else got any questions? Show hands. Nope. Nope. Omar? I told her to set up a booth.
Well, you know I'm not here for that, and I just want to...
Right. But you can purchase all her books on eBay. I got them all. I'm gonna get them, signed and all that. So I would suggest y'all find her books while she's here, and get her John Hancock. I'm a huge book collector beyond comics, especially Black women's books. And I get them signed if I can, and I will go off on that. But yeah, we're gonna conclude things. Do you guys want to share anything, or just okay?
For more witty repartee from Richard, you can follow us on Black Comic Lords. We're on all of your social media, also on the website blackcomiclords.net. Please give us a follow, like, share, subscribe, follow us, and thank you, Greg Burnham.
Can y'all talk about the podcast and stuff? I think it's vital. Can you hear me?
Can we talk about podcasts?
The podcast. Tell them when you do the podcast.
Oh yeah.
It's vital to this community. Keep it short though. Keep it short.
Okay.
So who are we?
Come on.
Tell them who we are.
You just said keep it short.
Queen
Listen,
Ramonda, who are you?
listen. If you want to be entertained and easily amused, go to YouTube and just put in Black Comic Lords. We do a show on Wednesday night, which is called Wednesday Night Wrap Up. We talk about the comics that come out during the week. On Friday night, my man Paul here with his partner Mark likes to drink a little whiskey and talk about Black Panther. You'll be entertained.
Good whiskey.
Yeah, good whiskey. And on Sunday nights, to get your week started, holla at your boy Real Talk with Rich. I talk about all things comics, life. Just a good time. Just follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook. But if you want to check us out as far as the podcasting, Wednesday night, Friday night, Sunday night, Black Comic Lords.
That's it. Thank y'all for coming out. God bless you. Good night.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will.
If this the land of the free, it was a freedom then, when they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off. Called themselves a republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand, yeah.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. We will.
So if we put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course, versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course, cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. We will.